We're back. This time we're going to be taking a look at the Firefly the Game. I actually put off buying this one when it first came out. I'm a huge Firefly fan, but the game itself was limited print when it was first released, and they were going for ridiculous amounts of money online. And put off buying it, and to be honest, I forgot about it until more recently some new expansions started coming out and popularity rose up in it again. And a friend of mine actually picked it up for me. And I'm glad she did, because it's actually a pretty awesome game. So we'll get right in and take a look here. The box itself weighs a ton. And it's hard to see from this angle, but there is a ton of stuff that comes to this. And unfortunately, you really need a huge table. We have a 3x6 table, and we can barely fit all the components on when you're playing a game. So keep that in mind. The base set is good for 1 to 4 players. They only have one mission in there for solo, but it wouldn't be that hard to tweak some of the other ones. For solo play, the game uses a timer mechanic to keep you from just flying around and exploring rather than actually doing the mission. When you're playing multiplayer, you get the other players trying to complete the missions too, so it's kind of a race in that respect, and that's what keeps the game moving. They list it as a 2-hour playtime. That's very generous. If you've talked to anybody who's played the game, they tend to run long. The more people play, you get more familiar with rules and things, and you tend to take multiple players' turns simultaneously, which does cut down on the time. But even then, 2 players is very generous for a game of Firefly. Inside the box, they have the thing jammed completely full. Nice full color rulebook. Does a good job of explaining all the cards. There's a good example of the board fully set up for a 4-player game with all of the different decks of cards lined up. It takes up a lot of space. That board, when I get that out, wait till you see how big that is. And there's actually 2 expansions now that make that larger. But the book has lots of pictures and quotes from the TV show throughout it. These little text boxes filled with various quotes from the show, which are kind of entertaining. And they do a really good job of explaining all of the basics. Haven't had that many questions come up that weren't already covered in the book, which is always a good thing. And there's quite a bit to this game. It looks very complicated at first, but once you actually see it in use, it is a pretty simple concept. On the back, they give you some survival tips, some of which are extremely useful. So definitely check those out. Next we have the board. We're going to set that aside for now, and we'll unfold it in a minute. Under that, you normally have your punch out tokens. I've already punched everything out and separated them, but first thing here are ship dashboards. Box set comes with 4. There's also several new ship expansions available, as well as a pirate and bounty hunter expansion that comes with new ships. Everything in here is a Series 3 Firefly, which Serenity was in the show. And they all have the exact same stats. You have your 8 cargo bay, 4 stash, your drive core, and your 3 upgrade slots, a crew of 6, and your 3 active jobs over here. Each player is going to get one of these. This is pretty much where you keep track of everything you're doing for the game. Next we have the mission cards. I actually kept them in the original packaging just because they don't stay in the little slot they give you. You get a handful of these. Each one of them has different goals. They range from basic shipping goals running back and forth here and there. There's ones that force you to do crime. And there's just basic variations on the game. In the base set here, they're all pretty similar. There is the solo play game here, which has a lot of special rules because it's solo based. But then there's variations. Some of these have a single goal. Player makes it to 15,000. They take a goal token. Or some of them have multiple goals. In the case like these, they have multiple goals. You have to complete the first goal to move on to the second goal, to move on to the third goal. Whoever completes the third goal first wins the game. And then there's a standard game setup. Tells you how to set the game up for a basic game. Some of these special missions have their own special setup rules, which are different than the original. Like in the case of the solo game here, I believe you actually get to start with a crew. Yeah, you can select up to 4 crewmen. And you don't get that in the normal game. You have to actually find them and buy them. So they do change depending on the mission that you're playing. And I believe most of the expansions come with new missions that pertain to the ships or whatever that are in those expansions, and all of them have different options, so there's a lot of variety there as far as those go. The game has tons of tokens. These are our cargo and contraband tokens. They fit on your ship over your little cargo bay slots. These are used to represent various contraband and cargo that you pick up throughout the game to complete your missions and transfer around to the different planets. These bags don't come with the game, by the way. I separated them all out myself. These are hard to see because the bag's tinted, but I'll take them out later. But these are your fuel tokens. These you use to fuel your ship in order to do hard burn and move quickly across the universe. These are spare parts. These you're going to be using to fix your ship or for various odds and end things throughout the verse. Definitely worth having a few of these around. You don't want to break down in the middle of Reaver space without spare parts. Next we have our fugitive and passenger tokens. These are used for passengers and whatnot that you pick up on your ship to transfer from planet to planet or wherever you're going. Love the little frowny face tokens. These are used to represent turn counters in the single player game, but they're also used for disgruntled tokens. Depending on what you do, you can anger your crew and your captain, and there's various results depending on how disgruntled your captain or crew are. Those are used to mark that. And last we have our warrants and goal tokens. Goals are used to keep track of how many goals you've completed throughout the mission, and warrants are issued based on doing illegal activities or failing certain tasks, and basically make the Alliance come out after you. For the ship models, each player is going to get themselves a little Firefly. They're kind of a rubberized plastic. It's very flexible and soft. But I've seen people paint these up and do some pretty interesting things with them. I think for game pieces, they're pretty well detailed. Some people complain about them. There is a resin kit available that has all the ships that come with the basic set and a higher detailed resin. So if you're really looking to paint, you can get those. The set comes with 4 Firefly class ships, 1 for each color for each player. They pretty much serve the purpose, I think, so I don't think I'm going to do much with mine. Next we have the Alliance Cruiser. If you're familiar with the show, you should be familiar with these ships. Not quite as much detail on these ones. Again, yeah, mine's even bent a little bit here. The resin kit comes with one of these that you can paint up to. That's a lot more detailed, but again, it serves its purpose for the game, at least as far as I'm concerned. And last we have our Reaver ship. A lot of people when this game first came out were complaining because it looks like it's mismolded and it's missing the engine on this side. That's actually how the Reaver ships looked in the show. They're beat up scrap ships basically. Don't have containment on their engine cores, so the crew's exposed to radiation and things. They're supposed to be just barely holding together. So it's an accurate representation. Again, pretty cool looking model, and the resin kit does come with a resin version that's more detailed, so you can paint them if you want. One of the more entertaining things from the box set is the player token. This is used to designate whose turn it is, and anyone who's a fan of the show will recognize the dinosaur. But they do suggest in the rules that to make the game more authentic, as soon as possible you should replace this with an actual toy dinosaur. I heard some people do reviews where they refuse to use the dinosaur because maybe they're not a fan of the show or they don't understand it, but it does make sense and it does make the game move along faster, especially once people are familiar with the rules. Certain things take a little extra time, like buying things at the end of your turn. If the last thing you're doing is going through discard piles trying to find things you want to buy, then you can pass this on to the next player and they can start their turn while you're going through the piles and buying. it's not going to affect what they do anyway, and it moves the game along. Next up, we have a couple of custom D6s. The 6s on these are replaced with Firefly emblems. And the game does use a exploding die mechanic. If you ever roll one of the Firefly logos, it counts as a 6, and you get to roll the die again. So it lets you build some of those tests in the game that have like a 9 required. You can still pass it even if you don't have a lot of bonuses, if you just get lucky rolls. Which is nice, and it's not as detrimental as the exploding mechanic is in some games. You don't really get to overkill much because you're only rolling one die at a time, so you're not going to see those huge explosive numbers like you do in some games where you're rolling handfuls of dice at a time. But it's still there to give you that off chance that something miraculous happens like it does often in the show. Next thing we have is the money. I was kind of skeptical of this when I first saw it, but now that I've played a few games with it, I really like it. It's reminds me a lot of Monopoly back in the day, where you're handing cash back and forth as you do things, and they're all really nicely detailed, front and back. They actually look like real currency, and they have that Chinese theme because the Firefly universe is kind of a mishmash of everything with Chinese thrown in, which is kind of neat, but definitely interesting. Adds a nice little aspect to the game, and it's always nice to fling around cash when you're doing various things, and to get paid when you do a mission and you get paid with real money. You get this contact card, which is kind of nice. Explains on the blue side what happens if you happen to run into the Alliance cruiser, which is flying around the board. And on the flip side, it talks about what happens if you run into the Reaver ship. The Reaver ship is always a bad thing to run into. The Alliance cruiser is only a bad thing if you're doing something you're not supposed to, or you have outstanding warrants. Otherwise, it just makes you stop, which, to be honest, could be annoying, but it's worth it if you're not doing anything illegal. All you gotta do is stop for the turn. So, next we have all the decks. There is a lot of decks that come with this game. Start with this one first. The cards all have different backs, which you use to designate where they go. These "You Can't Take the Sky From Me" are your starting cards. Includes the starting drive cores that everybody's going to get for their basic Firefly drive, which has a range of 5. Requires 1 fuel to make a burn. Get to that when we actually get to the gameplay, but everyone's going to start with one of those. Next you have your various captains. There's Mal. And each one of these has different abilities. Down here in the bottom, they have different things they attribute to your crew, as well as different abilities. This guy gives transport. And then they have different skills which they offer, like Mal could be used as a pilot, he's also a soldier, and he's also moral. Moral crew and captains, if you do anything immoral, get one of those disgruntled tokens we talked about earlier. And if you get multiples of those, bad things happen. And then Mal counts as a Browncoat and gets extra 500 if you're doing crime jobs. And there's various different characters who have appeared throughout the show. All of them have different abilities. It adds a lot of variety. You can mix and match when you start. And each of the expansions that adds more to the game also comes with more captains. Traveling through space can be dangerous. When you're traveling through border space, there's a border space event deck, and when you're traveling through alliance space, there's an alliance space event deck. What you draw out of these, if you're just cruising along at 1 space per turn, you're not going to have to worry about it, but if you're burning, flying through sectors fast, each sector you go through, you're going to flip one of these over. And there's various things from, like this case, it's just empty space. You keep going. In alliance space, you have things like custom inspection, where they check your ship for fugitives and contrabands, or you can try to run, in which case they will issue a warrant for you. Most of these have an option, 1 and 2, so you get to choose between the two. In this case, if you have your stuff in your stash, it's no big deal, it just causes you to stop. However, say you had your entire cargo bay filled with contraband, that's going to get confiscated, and you're going to get fined a lot of money. So rather than pay that, you may want to burn and just risk getting the warrant. There's ones like the cruiser, which automatically brings the cruiser ship to the square that you're on. Also reshuffles the discard pile back into the deck. Ones like the cruiser patrol, which allow other players to move the cruiser to a new sector, and so on through there. I said most of the Alliance ones are not going to hurt you unless you're doing something illegal. On the other hand, if you're going through Reaver space, same basic things. There's a Reaver one that lets the player move the Reaver ship one space. There's empty space that allows you to keep flying. Out in the border space, you can also have things like your ship start to break down. You can attempt to patch it if you have mechanics on board, or you can spend parts and start fixing yourself and just keep right on going. And there's things like ghost ships you can run into, you can ignore or stop and check stuff out. You can even pick up salvage and things like that. Could be ambushed by scrappers. Things are a lot more dangerous in border space, but there's also a lot more options for finding things and making money out there as well without pesky Alliance interference. Next deck of cards is the Aim to Misbehave. This is a deck you're going to use to complete jobs or crime or anything that's going to require you to do something that's kind of iffy or illegal. In which case you're going to flip over one of these cards, and again you're going to have multiple options. You can do the skill checks here, and these are the numbers you need to roll, and this is what happens. If you botch an attempt, it just means you're done for the turn. You have to start over next turn. If you get a proceed, you go on past this. If you need multiple ones, you go on to the next one. Otherwise, you're done. And if you have the requirement down here at the bottom, you automatically proceed. So if Wash is on board your ship, you can automatically pass this one without even having to worry about it. And new aspect that was on these cards from the very beginning are these little suits in the corner. And newer expansions make use of those for different gambling and interesting things like that. Here's another Misbehave card. This one has some more detrimental aspects on here. Tight security. First thing you can do is try to use your mechanic to hack through. And you can do the skill check. If you botch again, you can try again next turn with a new Misbehave card. Or you can proceed. Or you can do things the old real subtle guy way and blast your way through with your weapons. However, if you fail in this case, you're going to kill off a crewman, and you're also going to get a warrant issued. If you get a warrant issued and you're working on a job, you automatically lose that job, and you lose the solid status you may have with any of your contacts because they don't want to be associated with you now that you're a criminal. And again, down here, if you have a hacking rig, you can automatically proceed. Lots of different variety to those, and basically makes you want to build up different levels of your skill, whether you build a crew that's good at fixing things or a crew that's good at gunfighting. You need a variety to make your way through these to complete various jobs, and essentially the goals for most of the missions require you to misbehave at some point as well. The next stack in the middle here is all our contacts. And these are going to be spread out throughout the universe on their home planets, which are all designated on the map. You have Niska, Patience, Harkin, Badger, and Amandol. Those are all the ones in the base set here. And this really cool little mechanic they used. These are actually the backs of the cards, and there's a lot of information on these as well. When you do complete a mission for a contact, it actually goes right here behind your board, leaving those exposed, and you get those benefits once you've become solid with them. It allows you, in this case, to sell contraband for $800 or cargo for $400 to Niska, as well as this ability here. For Niska, it's actually quite detrimental, but if you remember him from the show, he was kind of a jerk anyway. Down here it says what planet they're on. It's also marked on the map for the game board. All of Niska's jobs are illegal, so keep that in mind. There's various things like the Alliance contact, all of his jobs are legal. Illegal jobs tend to pay more. Down here is how much you're going to get paid. And if you have this requirement here, you get a bonus. And then you have to have at least these requirements in order to work the job. In this case, a hacking rig, 2 mechanic skills, and a negotiation skill. All the missions have a little fluff down here that explains what they are. The newer ones have a much bigger, like a paragraph down there in some of the expansions, which are kind of cool because it really gets thematic on what they are. And then up here is where you have to go, the type of job, and what you need to do. In this case, if you were to take this job, you need to fly to Osiris and White Sun, complete 3 successful misbehaves, and then get paid. Other various ones have you transporting things from here to there. Here's an example of one of Niska's transport jobs. You're going to go to New Hope, Georgia. You got to misbehave twice to pick up 3 fugitives. And then you're going to fly to Motherlode Rensun, deliver those 3 fugitives, negotiate, which is this over here, and then you're going to get paid this much plus your bonus if you get it. If you negotiate, you could get less, you could get more depending on what you get. This job is also immoral, which is going to disgruntle any moral crew that you may have. So lots of different variety in there depending on where you go and who you talk to. It is very possible to do the entire game just doing legal jobs for the legal contents, but it is going to take you longer because they do pay quite a bit less. And our last huge deck of cards here is actually several smaller decks. And each one of these decks pertains to a space station or planet on the board. And each one is going to offer you various things. These are your supply decks. When you go to those planets, you can draw from these or work from their discard piles to find things like crew and various supplies you can buy to add to your inventory, as well as ship upgrades to add to your ship. And these are going to help you do various things and complete the missions easier, like crewman. This is a scrapper pilot. Gives you this ability here. Gets you fuel if you're salvaging things. He also gives you a bonus to your mechanics. The catch is, if you ever use these guys that you hire on a mission, you also have to pay them this cut from the successful mission total. So if you're getting $1,000 for the mission and it required you to use him at some point during the mission, you're only going to get $800 because $200 of that's going to him. Each planet supply deck offers different things. The Bazaar has a little bit of everything. Silverhold's mostly going to be weapons and things like that. Persephone has a lot of crewmen and items that you can equip your crew with. Osiris Shipworks is obviously parts for your ship. And Regina is another one that's got pretty much a variety. There's some crewmen in there, there's some weapons in there, and a bunch of ship parts. A little bit of everything in there. Most of the decks have at least one of each type, I think, in there, so you can really pick and choose where you want to go and what you need. So here's a look at the game board. It's absolutely huge. I think each one of these tiles is around 11 inches or 12 inches, so it gives you an idea. And there's also expansions to add from like this section over. It'll add that much more to the left hand side over here of the board, and another one that adds that much on the other side. So the game board does get quite huge by the end. Not to mention you're going to need to lay out all those supply decks. I try to lay them across the end on the far side, which nobody's going to be sitting at, and then put a discard pile next to each, and then the navigation decks down one of the sides. But you also have to keep in mind that on top of all those, around the edge of the board, you need to keep enough space for these, and all the upgrades for each of the players as well. So you can see where the game takes up a lot of space. Someone on Board Game Geek has scanned these and then made them so you can print them out at a slightly smaller scale, which lets you fit more on the table. There's definitely plenty of room. You can see each of the squares is quite large compared to the ships themselves for the most part. So there is room for scaling. But having it larger does allow multiple ships in the same square, which does have an effect. When you're setting up the game, the Alliance Cruiser is going to start here in Londinium, which I'm sure I'm saying these wrong. And the Reaver Cutter is actually going to start over on the Firefly logo. Each of the players starts on a various planet throughout the board. And with future expansions, you can actually pick a home port. And there's a little token that you put on the port, and they're color-coded to match the ships, so you can mark which one is your haven. And you can't be attacked while in those. The base set of the game doesn't include any rules for player versus player. So it's all basically you're trying to work against the game itself to complete the goals first. It's more of a race. Lots of pickup and delivery type stuff. Lots of going out and doing crime. You're picking and choosing what missions you want based on your play style. Do you like to pick up lots of cargo and ship it across? Do you like to do crime? Do you like to do illegal activities? You know, the thing to keep in mind is the routes that you're going to take. Amandol offers a lot of weird cargo routes that go from the Red Sun area, which is this section of the board, all the way over to Georgia. So you're going across the entire board. Now, whether that's illegal and you want to skirt the borderlands and risk running into the Reavers, or if you want to cut straight through Alliance space, which is this blue circle here in the middle, and then risk running into that cruiser and getting stopped, arrested, or worse, then it's up to you and your playstyle. The board looks really confusing at first, and a lot of people were kind of iffy about it when it first came out. Now that I've played a few games, I kind of like it. And it has that space feel to it. You see the suns in the middle, and then the circular, or basically the solar system around those stars. It's kind of interesting. Especially once you add on the extra stuff. When you do add the extra stuff, there is a Blue Sun expansion, which goes over here, and it adds more to Reaver space. And the Reavers no longer start in that corner. They all start up around the planet Miranda from the movie Serenity. So that changes a few things. It also adds new decks for Reaver space as well as Rim space. But for what we have here in the basic set, this blue area in the middle is all your Alliance space. The cruiser is going to patrol this area. Basically, you don't want to do anything illegal in this area, or the risks are a lot higher for as far as fines and warrants go. The outer areas of the map are all border space. Border space, you don't have to worry about the cruiser. You can run into cool things like asteroid fields you can mine, or derelict ships you can salvage, but at the same time you run the risk of Reavers showing up. And they start in that corner, and they are going to gradually move around the board, but there's also that card in there that can bring it right to the square you're on, which is very bad. Despite how complicated everything looks, it's not that bad. So in each turn, the player is going to choose 2 actions, actually, out of a possible 4. You can't repeat the same one twice. Your options are to fly, which is how you move around the galaxy and get to the different places and do the different things. Buy, which if you're on a planet that has stuff for sale, you can go through them and buy, sell, and other things. Deal, if you're on a planet or have a way of contacting one of the various contacts in the galaxy, you can deal with them, try to pick up new jobs, see what's available. Or work, if you're on the starting location for a job that you already have in your hand, you can begin working on them. Or if you're at a place where you need to drop stuff off, you can use an action to work on them. That's how you complete those jobs, get paid, work towards your goals of actually winning the scenario. Each of those actions kind of breaks down into smaller categories. Flying, for example, you can do what's called a mosey, which is where you just move 1 square. There's no detrimental effects, nothing, doesn't cost you any fuel, but you can only move the 1 square, and that's it for the fly action. That works out good if you're within one, like say you wanted to get to here and you're here. Why, you're not going to waste the fuel or whatnot, you can just hop over. You can also get upgrades for your ship that allow you to mosey 2 squares. Come in very handy at certain times. Like I could get from, it's kind of whitewashed out, but I could get from here to Silverhold down here if I could mosey 2 without having to burn any fuel. Your other option for flying is a full burn, in which case you look at your drive core. That's how far you can move at the cost of that much fuel. So in this case, you're going to spend 1 fuel to move up to 5 squares. When doing a full burn, every square you move, you're going to draw from the respective deck to see what happens. So in this case, if we were going up to the Bazaar, you could do 1 square of Alliance space, 2 squares of Alliance space, 1 square of border space. And you would have to resolve each one of those cards before you move on to the next. If they say keep flying, you keep going. If they say to stop, then that's where you have to stop, unfortunately. The full burning does have its restrictions, and there are drive cores that allow you to move. I think I've seen up to 8, depending on the expansion and what you get. And there's other ways to increase it as well. I believe Wash lets you increase your burn by 1, 2. So there's lots of different ways to increase that. If we were here on the Space Bazaar, we could do a couple different things. First of which would be to buy. And at the beginning of the game, you're going to take the top 3 of these from each deck and turn them face up so you have a discard pile to look at. And you can look through these at any time. It's good to do ahead of time to decide if there's anything in there you're interested in. In this case, we have a gun hand, a scrapper, and a knife. And if there's one of them you're interested in, say we want the gun hand, we could take him, and on our turn as a buy, we can look at 2 more. You get to consider 3 cards, but you can only buy 2. And you can take as many or as few as you want from the discard pile, and then the rest come out of the deck. And you look at them, decide if you want any of these. Fake IDs are nice to get those pesky alliance off you, or they help on some of the misbehave things. And you pay the cost down here in the bottom corner to add them to your ship. The ones you don't want get discarded, and other people can look at them to buy later. And in this case, the crew would go to your ship if you buy them, and this would go on. And you could give 1 item to each of your crewmen when working on a mission, and you get the bonuses listed on here as well. The other option we could do, since this is also Amandul's home base here, would be to deal. And again, with these, at the beginning of the game, you're going to have a discard pile of these as well as the regular one. And the same thing goes for these. You can look through the discards if there's one that you want, or you can draw new ones. And you're allowed to have up to 3 in your hand at a time, and you're allowed to have up to 3 active at a time. The ones in your hand you can't do anything with until you get to the starting point, which is here. Like this one, for instance, starts right here at Red Sun. So if this were the case, we could take our second action and work, which would put this as our active mission. You put it off to the left side of your ship, which is kind of off camera here, but those are the active jobs you're working on. Since we meet the requirements, we would load up our 2 contraband, and then we'd have to fly to Cary, Georgia, complete a misbehave, and deliver our 2 contraband, and then roll this check over here to see if we get plus or minus to our pay, as well as the bonus if we have a grifter on board. And that's pretty much all there is to it. There's, like I said before, some of these require different requirements in order to complete. You get those through your captain and crew. In this case, Captain Mal already meets the requirement for the guns. We would just need something for the mechanic. And you repeat those until you get enough money to start working on the goals for the scenario. There's lots of gameplay videos out there if you want to see how the game actually plays. It's nice to have the single player variant as well. The really only downside to the game is that it takes a long time to play. The more players you add, the longer the game takes. Which, if you're a fan of the show, you're having fun, you know, the flavor text and things on the card are very thematic of the show. And they're going to make the time pass quicker. You're not going to notice so much. At the same time, the more players you have, the more downtime there is in between turns. With the base set, there isn't a lot of player interaction. The only real interaction in the base set comes if 2 Fireflies are in the same system. The 2 can trade, swap, buy, sell off of each other, off things that they have on board their ship. Maybe they have some crew they want to get rid of. They have some equipment they don't need, spare parts, fuel, that kind of thing. You can trade back and forth between yourselves. And doing that can be done on any player's turn. So while someone's taking their turn, you could be dealing with someone in an adjacent square. Another thing that happens is if you have crew on board your ship that are disgruntled, a player in an adjacent square can buy those crew for their crew costs, which is down here in the bottom corner, directly off their ship. So if this guy was on our ship and he was disgruntled, I don't have the tokens handy, but he had one of those disgruntled tokens on there, the other ship here could buy him for 100 right off of your ship, basically hire him out from underneath you. If at any point your crew gets 2 disgruntled tokens, they quit, they jump off ship, go back to wherever their home base is. Just by the back of the card, they would go back to the Space Bazaar, and he goes in the discard pile so somebody else could hire him later. If your captain ever gets 2 disgruntled tokens on him, he gets pissed off and fires everyone on your crew. So you want to keep your captain happy at all costs. And the captain gets disgruntled tokens as well if, say you're dealing with the Reavers or something, ends up having to kill him. Since your captain can't die, it's very unthematic. He gets a disgruntled token instead. So you got to keep your captain happy so that you don't lose your crew in that respect. And you want to keep your crew happy so they don't jump ship or other people buy them off of you. Other than that, there's not a lot of interaction between players in the base game. There is a pirate and bounty hunter expansion, which adds a lot of other ways for ships to interact. There's even a boarding action where you can board on people's ship and try to steal stuff or capture crew members who have warrants out. Things like that. There's a whole bounty hunter system that goes with it, and a couple new ships too. So if you're interested in a little more player interaction, then that's definitely something to look into. But as far as the base game goes, as long as you're a fan of the show and the movie and Firefly universe in general, I think there's plenty to keep you occupied. Although I do think the games run a bit long. Some scenarios are going to be longer than others too. That makes a big difference. Overall, I think it's a very fun, very thematic game. Anyone interested in the Firefly universe should definitely give it a try. It may not be your thing. A lot of people consider it a pick up and deliver type game. While that is an aspect, there is a lot more to it. The crime missions are kind of fun. Avoiding the Alliance patrols are kind of neat. And the expansions definitely add more to it as you go. Again, it is kind of a solitary game. If you're looking for something with a lot of player interaction, this might not be it. But it's definitely a solid game on its own. There's a lot of random chance with the dice and things like that, the random decks for navigation. But at the same time, if you're going to the different planets and you're doing the missions and things to build up your crew and build up your stash to give you those bonuses to the die rolls, then they're not so random. Because once you get a captain, like if you take Mel, who's got that +2 bonus to your combat, and you add Jane to your crew, who gives you another bonus to your combat, and you add a couple mercs to your crew that gain bonuses to combat, and you gain guns that gain bonus, and then you go do one of the missions or misbehave things that require combat, well, it's not so random. You're pretty much going to pass. Same thing goes with Kaylee's a great mechanic, and there's several other good mechanics in the game. If you have them on your crew, then you're pretty much sure to pass on a mechanic test. So while there is random chance in the game, there are ways to combat that through skill and actually playing the game. You go around, you build up the crew. That's part of the point, is to find the right crew for the way you want to play. If you plan on doing a lot of misbehaving, then fighters are definitely going to be worth your while. Mechanics are another good one to get you the bonuses to things like hacking. You want to make sure you have things like a hacking rig if you're doing a job where you might have to get by security, that kind of thing. So there is a strategy element to it as well. Definitely a fun franchise if you're interested in the subject matter. Otherwise, it's a hit or miss. Check out one of the many gameplay videos that are on YouTube and see if it's something you'd be interested in. And we'll see you in the next video.